GWP presents GW.
And what does that mean in terms of my own identity? And I find that, I'm looking back, I'm trying to, at the past, I'm trying to make sense of what my future will look like or what responsibilities it means for myself. So, in terms of disrupting, I would say the disruption happens in my practice. I'm taking an unconventional surface, like steel, I'm disrupting it, whether I'm drawing on it or rusting it or using alchemical processes. So all of that forms part of my story and part of my identity.
Yes, and I think in a lot of your interviews you speak about voice as a core part of your identity. Why is that important for you to have that voice, to make that distinct clarity around who you are in your voice in the way that you do your art?
Look, I think being a visual artist in a contemporary artistic setting, you have to have a voice. And you always push to have a voice, when you study, you have to have a message and a voice. And I think as artists, we all grapple with that. And is it going to be read in the right way, that you're wanting it to be read? Because the viewer can interpret things very differently.
Absolutely. All right, thank you. Let's move to Mbali. Candice really speaking about that I being very political, that voice being very intentional. And I think even in your introduction, you're a black woman, your work does that. It juxtaposes kind of, your own ideas of who you are, your sense of self, in relation to how society sees people who look like you. How does your work then engage this concept of identity?
So where it starts for me is that I always try to go back to the most basic interaction with each word. For instance, I try to get to the definition of identity and culture and tradition and blackness and womanhood, and because I feel like sometimes the definitions that stand currently.
Because when you are working, when you are not working, like you will always be treated differently compared to someone who's working. I know some of us that when they went, when they went to go and check the refrigerator, you find that there is a whip instead of getting the drumstick, and you can't even do.
You took us there. Because there's a politics between the breast, the thigh, and the
So there's always there's nothing that you can't say. There's nothing that you can't say. It's like that.
And I love it. I love it because I used to be a sketch comedian myself. So I love when we hold up a critical mirror to society and kind of laugh about it in a way that also helps us reflect on some of those things. And it's what somebody is saying. There are things we can't actually, we don't have a language for certain things, but art does that. It gives us a way in to be able to say, hi, Bomara, are we really stressing about the drumstick and your way? About portions, chicken portions. So I love that, and I think that is also quite exciting that we have a voice now. We have this weapon and this tool that allows us to reflect ourselves to ourselves and then to be able to talk about, are we still happy? Are we still evolving? And is this the direction we want to take? Candice, maybe let's shift a little bit to this relationship with the audience now, right? Like, yes, we're wanting to be honest, we're wanting to express and challenge. But the audience has quite a pivotal or critical role role in the way that your work is received, in the way that your work is interpreted, in the way that your identity is spoken about. So how do you find that balance between this is my work, this is my identity, this is my voice?
There's a very famous quote, I just don't know who the originator or who coined it, and it says, art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. And for me, it's important that we constantly, test the barriers of our society and in meaningful engagement. And so for me, the audience is almost an integral part of my process. So when I'm making work, I do work by myself in my studio, but I am always wary not to function in isolation. I need to be amongst and to be thinking around and to be engaging all the time in order for me to actually because as much as I'm talking about my experience is not special. There's a lot of people who can reflect and think around it with me and find themselves also questioning certain, ways in which we do things and how to do them better. So it is completely existing around those perimeters where it's constantly trying to, also another thing about me is I'm very biased in the sense that I really love beautiful things. So even in my making, as much as I might be talking about something that is relatively serious, I want it to be visually aesthetic and appealing and attractive, because I believe that, I was raised Christian, and there's something about the way the Bible will always portray the devil as something that will be deadly towards you, but definitely entice you, like a vampire type of even if it may not be the best analogy to describe the word, but you want to invite people into the conversation enough for them to then ask, what is this? And then suddenly you feel uncomfortable, and then they question why it is that you feel uncomfortable.
People are facing, especially artists, visual artists in particular.
And also she's systems.
Accepting the rejection.
Oh yeah, that's about
Accepting the rejection.
I mean, like financially,
yeah, go ahead.
I would say take every opportunity that comes your way. Whether it's tiny, it'll always lead to something else. Enter every competition that is out there, and you'll get rejected the first few times, but then you'll get somewhere.
Vision about what it means to be an artist, because you have these grand ideas of making it into the world, but you need to actually have alternative sources of income. Secondary job when you're starting off, you are somebody's studio assistant, you're practically every week, twice a week or 3 times a week, have some form of money coming in. Otherwise you will never be able to buy material, and then you will be scruffing around. It might inspire you to use recycled material, but the ideal is that you need to definitely find alternative sources of income. My lecturer in varsity, Ariana, used to always say that there's 3 ways that you can make it as an artist. The most 3 basic that she can think of under professional practice. She says either you are born wealthy and you have a...
He's not better than no one is. You still the same person. You still gonna create the art. Remember, we artists, there's no retirement.
That's true.
Hey, well, that is so sobering.
The 2 hours that you told me about, automatic, I'm going to pay you 2 minutes, similar to those numbers, which means it's very tricky. It's very tricky. It looks so simple, but it's very
Warwick was saying, there is a breaking down of walls in order to, in order to find out what the designer and the brand have in common and what they can communicate effectively together in collaboration. But just before we continue, I want to go sort of onto especially for both you and Warwick, because both of you obviously working with brands, and you become the conduits in a way for designers to access these opportunities. What should people know about accessing these kinds of collaborations, and how can they access them?
I mean, these are the magic questions that we have been a theme. And I think what's been, I think a lot of what's been incredible for me to learn from some
awards opportunity. And then it's about business, feeling the responsibility and creating opportunities that people can move towards. It's a responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is, right? And it takes one, the business, because it's not my business, I just look after the brand, but the business to recognize that we have a responsibility locally to ensure that we support this community, because that is what's going to change everything, I think. So, and even more so, I think it's the people behind the brands also recognizing, because as a brand person, things work in cycles, and you execute cycle.
So because we were started in the Nando's world really as curation, so Nando's was looking, and I'm trying to keep this brief, but it is complex. They were looking for a way to express an authentic South African aesthetic. And my challenge to them was that you need to curate as opposed to design it from a studio space. And then it was about, okay, how do you bring in many voices to express this? So that was about the head office representing South African design on a massive scale. So that was about going to the designers and saying to Dr. and Mrs., can you make the reception desk? And going to a shelter and saying we want to have recycled lighting, can you make lighting for us? And so it was working with those existing businesses, okay? And the transactions are direct. So Nando's never profited.
And then I'll get the feedback, because this is where I want to actually take my business, and this is what it takes for it to be there. Then I have no choice but to do the paperwork and do all the admin, and then you realize once you start working, then you also can pull other people in. You don't have to always be the accountant yourself. Pull the accountant in, pull an admin person in when the opportunity presents itself, especially financially, so that the business also can start to grow. So yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I think also this is a good note to